City Council and the Glendale Redevelopment Agency. May we have a roll call for the City Council?
Council members: Draymond.
Here.
Friedman.
Here.
Najarian.
Here.
Weaver.
Here.
Mayor Quintero.
Here.
And roll call. How about roll call for the agency, please?
Agency members: Friedman.
Here.
Najarian.
Here.
Quintero.
Here.
Weaver.
Here.
Chairman Draymond.
Here.
May we have your report?
Agenda for the June 16, 2009 joint public meeting of the Glendale City Council and the Glendale Redevelopment Agency was posted on Thursday, June 11, 2009 on the bulletin board outside City Hall. Before us today, item 1 is Director of Development Services regarding amendment to the cooperation and reimbursement agreements between the City of Glendale and the Glendale Redevelopment Agency for the Central, Glendale, and the San Fernando Road Corridor redevelopment project areas for purposes of adjusting the interest rate. 1A is Council Resolution authorizing amendment to the agreements, and 1B is Agency Resolution authorizing amendment to the agreements.
Mr. Starbird.
Yes, I'll go to Phil Lanzafame for the report. Phil?
Mr. Mayor, Mr. Chairman, members of the City Council and Redevelopment Agency, when the agency was formed in 1972 and started activity in the Central Project area, and again in 1992 when the San Fernando Road Corridor project area was formed, the city advanced funds so that the agency could conduct its redevelopment activities. We did that in the form of a loan from the city, and we memorialized it through cooperation agreements. At the time, those cooperation agreements indicated that interest would be paid at the city's investment portfolio rate. Currently, that is under 2.5%. At this time, we think it more appropriate that the rate be adjusted to the agency's actual cost of funds. What would it cost us to issue bonds and borrow that money? That is around 7% today. This accomplishes two things. I believe that it gives the city a fair return for loaning the dollars. In addition, it establishes debt for the redevelopment agency, which is required in order to collect the tax increment. The redevelopment agency makes a payment to the city each year and reduces or retires some of that, but it's for the most part continuing to grow. Once the redevelopment agency expires and we go through our 10-year period with the ability to collect increment, we believe, at least in the Central Project area, that tax increment would continue to flow to repay the city debt, giving us probably 2, 3, maybe 4 more years of tax increment to the City of Glendale. So we are recommending that both the City Council and the Redevelopment Agency adopt these resolutions to amend those cooperation agreements. If you have any questions, legal staff is here, finance is here, as well as development services staff.
Are there any questions? Mr. Najarian.
We don't have a problem. I mean, there seems to be a conflict between our roles as redevelopment agency and city council, whereas the interest rate is being adjusted upward with no consideration, apparently. Can that be done? Is there any problem with that?
Mr. Chair, members of the Redevelopment Agency, Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council, no, the City Council is the legislative body, actually, that established the Redevelopment Agency and set forth the policy for that agency to commence and be underway. This is really to bring these agreements into conformance with what the current financial conditions are, and doesn't rise to the level of a conflict for the city to agree to allow the agency to be charged a higher rate of interest at this point in time. It doesn't rise to a level of conflict. And so, but you're seeking an answer to whether or not there is sufficient consideration supporting this to allow this to occur.
Right.
And the consideration for the agency is that it gets to continue to collect tax increment for purposes of continuing its programs. It has to have debt in order to function. So this is in the best interest both of the city in being able to collect an appropriate rate of interest, and in the best interest for the redevelopment agency for purposes of continuing to accumulate debt against which it can collect tax increment.
If I can.
So
that make sense?
But it's essentially revenue neutral for the agency. The benefit then would be flowing to the city.
If I
Because
can.
we'll be getting that increment and passing it off to the city.
If I can, there's a third benefit, and that is the agency gets to continue to allow its debt to the city to stay outstanding while it operates other programs as well. You've got $68 million in debt outstanding that the city continues to carry on its books and will, in all likelihood, until after all other debt is paid off. So, part of what the agency is getting is continuing that debt for a good portion of time, whereas you might not be so inclined in these tough times if you weren't getting a more reasonable rate on your return.
In light of the city's need for money, why don't we double the interest rate then?
Well, we should comment on that because we looked at that, and you could obviously propose to the agency that they pay 12%, I think is the legal limit. But we wanted to have this based in something reasonable. And currently working on our tax-exempt bond issue, we were reviewing rates for both taxable and tax-exempt issues, and seemed to us reasonable to tie this rate to the going rate on tax-exempt bonds that the agency would pay if it was going out and borrowing money. So that if you had to defend this later on from a charge by somebody such as the county or the state that you had milked this system, we'd have a justification for this, and it is reasonable.
Wouldn't want that to happen.
No, we wouldn't want that to happen.
Now, we're going for a fixed rate. Is there any chance that we could do some sort of variable?
Well, I was just thinking, your policy could be that we come back annually or every couple of years and actually look at what the tax-exempt rate is and begin. You wouldn't want to do it every month or so, but certainly on an annual basis, you could tie this to whatever the current non-taxable rate is for TI bonds.
I think that's the way to go. I mean, in the next couple of years, I think it should be fairly stable, but who knows, 3-4 years out, 5.
Pretty high now. We would likely expect to go down a little bit as the economy begins to recover, but for now, with all the uncertainties in California, the rate is pretty high.
Okay, Mr. Draymond.
Well, I was just going to ask whether the two items need to be taken.
One's agency.
Oh, one is. Okay. One's purely agency, one's council.
My only comment, this is all based on the way redevelopment agencies are currently structured by the state, right?
That's correct.
Cross your fingers.
Well, following that line of reasoning, what if, in fact, there is a major upheaval and situation changes in Sacramento? Once we've done this, are we sort of grandfathered in? I would assume we would be.
You would have your debt established by virtue of these cooperation agreements. If it was a matter of the agency paying or the city paying, you could make adjustments so that the agency could continue to pay it. And we wouldn't overextend ourselves to a point where the city would be responsible for it.
Like bonds, we would argue, let's say the state did something that essentially impaired our tax increment revenues. We would argue, just like we would with outstanding bonds, that this is a contract and the state cannot impair a contract. There's an outstanding debt, there's an agreement, it's documented. In the same way with bonds, you've got an outstanding contract, and it's been pretty clear that the state can't impair a contract, even by these mechanisms of redirecting resources.
Then we better do this.
And I'm for it even more than before, Mr. Draymond.
Well, I was just going to offer to move Council Resolution 1A.
Second.
Okay, any other comments? Roll call, please.
Council members Draymond,
Yes.
Friedman,
Yes.
Najarian,
Yes.
Weaver,
Aye.
Mayor Quintero.
And is there a motion for item 1B, which
So
is the
moved.
agency?
Second.
Socket.
Agency members Friedman,
Yes.
Najarian,
Yes.
Quintero,
Yes.
Weaver,
Aye.
Chairman Draymond.
Yes.
What's next, Mr. Kosaki?
Next on the agenda is Director of Development Services regarding execution of a First Amendment to agreement with Clear Channel Outdoor, Inc. to allow Clear Channel's advertising structure located north of the I-5 and 134 freeways to remain for an additional 5 years, and accepting the billboard from the Glendale Municipal Code in exchange for Clear Channel's removal of 15 billboards throughout the city. Add 2A's in the ordinance for introduction.
Mr. Starbird.
Yes, again, and Mr. Lands of Fame, Phil.
Mr. Mayor, Mr. Chairman, members of the Council and Redevelopment Agency, in 1994, the city entered into a settlement agreement with Patrick Media that allowed a billboard to be erected on the Interstate 5 freeway just before Western. That was due to expire and the billboard to come down in May of 2003. Prior to that, the redevelopment agency entered into an agreement with the Walt Disney Company, ABC7 Holdings, to build the ABC7 studio. One of the terms of that agreement was to enforce the terms of the prior settlement agreement and have that billboard come down in 2003. Prior to that, somewhere around May of 2003, it was suggested by then agency members and some community members that we negotiate with Clear Channel to keep the billboard in exchange for removing 18 billboard signs. I believe all of them were along San Fernando Road. We entered into that agreement extending their ability to keep the freeway billboard for another 5 years in exchange for taking down those 18 billboards. And we saw those come down and improve that road, San Fernando Road. The term of the extended agreement came due for expiration last June. Since that time, staff has been discussing with Clear Channel a proposal to again extend the freeway billboard sign easement or encroachment for another 5 years. In exchange, they would take down 15 billboards. Majority of them, I believe, are in the San Fernando Road corridor. However, some are throughout the city, as far north as Foothill Boulevard. And in looking at and identifying those billboards, we worked with Neighborhood Services and tried to identify the most egregious. I think the first one on your list there is the one that causes Mr. Engel the most headaches, and comment from the community, the neighboring residential community, when that billboard changes out. So in a nutshell, we are proposing and recommending to you that you adopt this ordinance that would authorize the city manager to extend that agreement. Clear Channel would remove 15 billboards that have been identified in your report in exchange for allowing the freeway billboard sign to remain another 5 years. It is an ordinance that would accept it from the municipal code, and it would also allow Mr. Starbird to enter into that agreement. It today is being offered for introduction and would come back the following week for approval. One other trailer piece with this would be to amend our ABC7 agreement with the Walt Disney Company. We would bring that back as a later date.
Do you have these signs in a PowerPoint or anything?
We do not. We have color copies in your packets.
I know. Just so the public would understand, before I go to Mr. Starbird, let me just read. This is going to make a big impact on...
Yeah, these are real. These are real
city.
rooftop.
Yeah, I recognize most of them.
I'd just like to say thank you for the large color ones that we can look
They're
at.
at eye level, pretty much, as you drive the... I mean, everyone would recognize them if they saw them. But there's one on West Glen Oaks, one on Foothill Boulevard, one on Los Feliz, Verdugo, 2 on East Chevy Chase, 2 on San Fernando, 2 on South Glendale, another 2 on San Fernando, 1 on North Verdugo, 1 on Foothill, and another one on Los Feliz, West Los Feliz. So it's a lot of visual pollution that's being removed. Mr. Starbird, then Mr. Draymond.
Yes, Mrs. Friedman asked me some questions before this meeting that Phil got me some answers to, and that was regarding the number of billboards that Clear Channel has in town and the number of billboards total that are in town. Clear Channel has 23 billboards in the city of Glendale, and if this is approved, then there'll be 8 remaining, including the one on the 5 freeway. There are a total of 53 billboards in town owned by Clear Channel and others, and if approved, this will take that number down to 38. There was also a question about our confidence that the agreement would not allow Clear Channel to convert the I-5 billboard to any of the new technology billboards like video or digital, and the wording in the agreement would not allow that.
Thank you for answering those questions.
I also have a question. What would keep, I assume our ordinance would prohibit it at this point, these are older signs, but what would prohibit Clear Channel or even a competitor? There's 2 at 11 Well, there's two at 4010 San Fernando Road. What would prohibit someone from going to 4012 San Fernando Road and putting up a building?
Our sign code would. The way that the agreement is drafted, Clear Channel must remove the improvements, so if anybody went to put them back up, they would be subject to our current sign ordinance.
Mr. Draymond.
Okay, well, first, thank you for the lack of a PowerPoint. Seriously, I did receive one email that I wanted to raise that point. I'm not sure I agree with the writer's contention, but I wanted to just put it out on the table for a little bit of discussion, Mr. Mayor. It has to do with the safety issue, the traffic issue of the one sign at the interchange there at the 5 and the 134. There was the suggestion that this area has seen a lot of, or an increased number of, mishaps, accidents. I want to know if that is based in any kind of fact that we know of, or just a conjecture. And secondly, if we could just address the safety issue of it.
Well,
the existing.
I don't know of any heightened accidents. Merely, it's on the freeway, so just merely what I hear on the news. I'm not aware of any. I did drive the streets today, and it's difficult to see the sign.
They're talking about on the freeway itself.
On the freeway.
Yeah.
So I don't believe that there's any on Glendale streets, and I'm not aware of any heightened accident activity on Interstate 5. The agreement does require them to maintain the sign consistent with the Business and Professions Code, I think that's what it is, which regulates freeway visible signs.
So they'd have to comply with Caltrans standards. And I suspect if they were out of whack and Caltrans was experiencing accidents related to this, then Caltrans would be following up with Clear Channel. And those things could come into play, although we don't permit it. I know with respect to the new video technology on billboard signs, that is an issue. Brightness, number of times signs changed, but that is not proposed for this. But so Caltrans does have standards.
Thank you.
Mr. Weaver.
Well, I've driven by that sign hundreds of times, and it is the merging of the on-ramp of the 134 North with the 5, so it is one of the slower reaches of the freeway as the two are coming together. So you're not exactly... I seldom see cars hitting 65 on that stretch where the merging is occurring. And 15 for 1... Some of these signs, boy, I'll sure be happy to see them go. It's pretty hard to turn down a 15 for 1. And where the sign is on the freeway, I don't know, but it would appear that to the south and to the west, all it is freeway. I mean, that'd be very distant, so it's not like there's residential all around that billboard. So the advantage of getting 15 for 1 makes a lot of sense.
Just on that, notable that we not forget about the original 18. So in the course of 5 years,
33.
there will be 33 billboard signs having been taken down. They'll get about 4 more years on this extension because about a year is already under their belt. So about 4 more years remaining on this big sign. But in effect, in 6 years, we've had 33 billboards come down. That's a lot.
Compared to other cities,
very
that's
significant.
Real nice.
What's that, Mr.? Come to Mr. Engel. Did you want to make a comment?
He prefers to mumble under his breath.
I caught
Shouldn't
that
have
comment.
Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council, Mr. Starbird, there's actually 5 additional billboards that have come down during that time, in addition to these ones that with Clear Channel, less it look like we're focusing on
We've
Clear
had
Channel.
38.
38 billboards have actually come down during that time. One final thing, and it kind of raises the issue of could these other boards be converted, similar to the issue that you read about in Los Angeles, where these billboards happen overnight. What you're looking at in the micro pictures and in the bigger pictures are part of our photo inventory, which the Planning Department started in 1978 when our sign ordinance was adopted. So we have a photo inventory of what those billboards are supposed to look like, and they are checked annually so that they don't expand in size or expand in brightness or in any other way. And That's how we catch the changes in those annually, just to provide a little bit of comfort to the city council.
Mr. Najarian.
So, what is Disney's involvement in this? They need to consent to
They
the
own ABC.
maintaining the billboard on the property.
That's correct, because as part of our owner participation agreement, the city agreed to enforce the terms of its settlement agreement and have that sign come down. That was embedded into our owner participation agreement. Disney was supportive in 2003. They are supportive again, recognizing the benefit of taking down the billboards.
So who's getting the revenue currently from that?
The
billboard?
Clear Channel gets the revenue off the freeway billboard, and that's compensation for taking down.
But they're leasing the land from someone for a billboard. purposes.
It's an encroachment. It's an encroachment permit from the city.
It's an encroachment permit from the city of Glendale.
Disney's concerned with...
Giving it to them for free?
That was part of the settlement.
That was part of the settlement agreement. It was an underlying lawsuit that was settled where a board was taken down. It was a takings case. And the settlement agreement was to allow them to relocate for a set period of time.
Disney's concern was entirely one of aesthetics.
In and around the campus.
Viewable in and around from their campus, right.
There's a senior Disney executive in the audience.
He's not a senior.
Taken his valuable time to come down
Not
here.
a senior, Mr. Mayor.
Would he like to make a comment?
He can't be a day over
Mr.
35.
Mayor, in that regard, 2 times now Disney has consented recognizing the benefit of the broader community and something that we need to thank them for.
He's not a senior.
Gilbert, did you want to make a comment?
He is
Can't be
getting older every day. However.
He can't be more than 35.
Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor, members of the agency. I'm Adam Gilbert, Director of Real Estate for the Walt Disney Company. This is something which we see as a partnership with the agency and agency staff. We, as Mr. Starbird mentioned, find the billboard an aesthetic issue, and we feel that for 4 years ago, we helped partner to get rid of 18 billboards up and down the San Fernando corridor, which is a redevelopment area where definitely there was blight, so I think we've all seen the aesthetic improvements there. And it's part of our backyard, too, so we're looking forward to seeing another 15 billboards come down, and in 4 years, maybe we'll see this other billboard come down as well. Glad to answer any questions, but the billboard is not on our property. We don't get any revenue or benefit from it at all.
Okay, Mr. Weaver.
Just a question for Phil. Is it possible the ones that are remaining, since you have a photo inventory, I'm curious to see where the ones that are going to be left after these?
We can provide that to you.
Where they
if
are.
Mr. Engel can give us the addresses, if we don't have them, we'll take the pictures.
Sam has pictures of them.
Yeah, I was just wondering, I'd like to look at them sometime.
Neighborhood Services has pictures.
Mr. Weaver, members of the City Council, members of the agency, we'll provide you with a complete inventory of where the remaining signs are. They're pretty much scattered all over town, with the exception of San Fernando Road, actually. That's probably one, ironically, where most of them were 7 years ago. That's where most of them aren't now. Most of them are scattered pretty much all over town. Mrs. Friedman had asked staff earlier what was part of the consideration in the selection of the 14, and part of it was, as Mr. Lansfame said, dealing with what is a part of the agency project, which is what this was, but also started to provide some equity with other places of town where we could remove ones, request that ones be removed, so that there were some changes in other neighborhoods as well as just San Fernando Road.
Okay, introduction. Yeah, Ms.
We did get a correspondence from Joanne Hedge representing the Glendale Rancho Homeowners Association, and I just want to give that a fair airing here. They have concerns over the billboard that's going to be left because that's the billboard that impacts them the most. So I'm wondering, sort of, assuming that we don't proceed with this settlement, what options we would have in terms of removing that billboard and the rest. Do we have any options, or is this kind of the best that we can do?
We feel this is the best that we could do. They're exchanging those 15 billboards for the additional 5 years. If we don't allow those 5 years, those other billboards, under their business model, need to stay.
If I can, the other option you have is to condemn them, in which case then you're into valuing them and paying for the other billboards. So the one on the freeway, you could require come down. that means the rest of the billboards would remain, they're grandfathered, unless the city were to go through an action to actually condemn them and pay value for them.
Which would be what ballpark?
Well, okay, go ahead.
We could use, typically what we use for billboards is we would rely on the Caltrans schedule of values. There's a valuation system for those. There was one that we condemned outside of the 18 that were taken down as part of this agreement. And that value for a billboard along San Fernando Road was in the neighborhood of $20,000. But that was just for the structure itself. That was not an argument for goodwill or lost revenue value. That was on a month-to-month situation. So to the extent that there are boards out there that are on longer-term leases, so it would be not just the value of a structure itself, which could be $20,000 or more. It could also involve the compensation for the lease value to the end of the term and potential goodwill and relocation.
And potentially a lawsuit, I would assume.
Absolutely.
Condemnation is a lawsuit.
Condemnation action.
A lawsuit, there's that expense as well.
That's correct.
Yeah, my only comment is that I absolutely have sympathy with the Rancho and with the people that have to look at this one sign, but if you balance that against all of the other signs and all the people that are looking at all of those signs, I do think that it's a prudent trade-off, and it is just for 5 years.
Actually, from this point, just 4.
Remaining four.
Excuse me, thank you.
Remaining 4.
Followed by Mr. Weaver.
I was just going to move the, to introduce the ordinance at
And I have nothing to say.
2A.
Okay, then the ordinance has been introduced at 2A.
I move to adjourn for the city council.
Second.
To adjourn for the redevelopment agency.
Second.
The agency is adjourned.